Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
The rich man was dying in the middle of the restaurant. The ambulance was late, and people didn't know what to do. But just then, the beggar took charge. "Your name is so mysterious," says some random guy from a dating site to me. "He probably wants to rush our meeting, and then a pleasant continuation will follow. But I'm just not interested at all. I'd rather write this story than go on a date with him. And yes, my name is Violetta. It's a beautiful name, I won't argue. I was told that my mom wanted to name me that, but I never asked her myself. My childhood began and ended at orphanage number 506. I remember being there from about the age of 3. Before that, I don't recall anything that happened. The caregivers confirmed that I had been there since birth. That's all they could say about my arrival at the orphanage. Honestly, I had nothing to complain about. Our orphanage was good. When I left it, I often heard people criticizing orphanages. I don't know what it's like in others, but I clearly got lucky. The caregivers tried hard and worked diligently. We were taught discipline, but not in a harsh way. It was through games. The playful format is ideal for children. It helps them learn better and remember things for a long time. So we hardly ever misbehaved. And if there was such a moment, the classic standing in the corner was applied. That was the extent of the punishment. I also quickly became friends with the other kids. There were many kids in my group who had also come to the orphanage since birth, and there were others who joined us gradually. I guess no one new joined us after we were about 16. There were times when teenagers were surrendered. There was definitely one of those kids every year. Usually, it left a traumatic impression on them, and they would withdraw into themselves, to the point that we couldn't get them to talk, even though we were always open to dialogue. We understood that each child in the orphanage needed special care. The caregivers couldn't give us as much love as we tried to give each other, which is why we almost never fought. We lived as one big, strong family. Once, a boy decided to offend our group. He was older than us, probably about 3 years. I think he was 17. He liked a girl from our group. He kept pursuing her, and then, when she openly rejected him, he got really offended and publicly slapped her on the behind in the cafeteria when she stood up to take her tray back. He managed to slip quickly from his table to ours. The girl dropped all her cutlery, and the plates broke. We didn't joke around with him for long. Our boys gave him a good beating. And during the next outing, we beat him up, not just the boys, but also the girls. I personally gave him a smack on the back. My palm burned afterwards, though, but it was worth it. Then our whole group stood before the director after the fight. Some of us hung our heads, embarrassed, you know. But I personally felt no shame. I looked directly into the director's eyes, and as I said before, we were punished leniently. The whole group was sent to stand in the corners of the orphanage, however many they could find. We stood there for about 3 hours, then they let us go. They were people too, and they understood that the 17-year-old guy was in the wrong. So that's how we lived, standing up for each other. If someone was taken away, we would throw them a farewell party. We went shopping with one of the caregivers. We bought cakes and children's champagne. In short, we threw a real feast for the lucky one. But he was still sad. A new family is good, but we had grown so accustomed to each other that it was hard to part ways, which is why our lucky one wasn't truly happy at all. For some reason, I was never taken away. But that's fine. It wasn't adoptive parents that mattered to me, but my biological ones. I probably started searching for them when I was around 13. I was watching some series with friends, where the theme of family was the main focus, and I thought, it's strange that all my peers know who their parents are, what their fate is, and I hadn't even cared about it until now. I had to stop the series and ask my friends whether I should look for my parents. Some were in favor, while others were against. Those who supported the idea said that knowing the truth about their parents made it easier for them to live. Those who were against it told me that their parents' fates were either not good or that they had found out about their betrayal, that their parents had traded them for money. Within me, 2 sides battled, to go to the head caregiver or the director and ask if I had parents, if they were in good health, or to forget about them once and for all right then and there. The desire to learn the truth about myself won out. I first approached the caregiver. She was unpleasantly surprised by my question about who my parents were and if she knew anything about them. Of course, I don't know anything about them. What business is it of mine, Viola? My job is to raise you, not to deal with your relatives who brought you here. That was rude. I didn't expect it. Perhaps she said that because she truly hated the parents who treated their children so heartlessly, so at that moment, I just shrugged and went to see the head caregiver. I found her in her office. I asked the question, "Can I get information about my parents?" She was taken aback. "No, we do not disclose that information," she said sternly. "Why not? They're my parents. Can I know who they are?" "No. You don't need to know that." "Wait. What about my peers? All the children at the orphanage know who their parents are. Or at least know why they were sent here. So what? Let them know. Go and don't bother me. You have no parents except for the orphanage and its caregivers." Now that was intriguing. Were they hiding some mystery from me? Did they want me to guess it? Who were my parents that I couldn't even find out? Finally, I decided to go to the most important woman in our orphanage, the director. But she also told me that it was unnecessary information for me. And why do adults decide everything for children? Do you think I gave up? Not at all. I asked my friends where our information might be stored. They all pointed to the archive located in the far wing of the orphanage. Usually, an attendant named Javier sat there, like in a library, but I had just learned the day before that he was on vacation, so the archive was empty. I just needed to grab the keys from the guard's office, and I would be set. I don't even want to describe how I took the keys. I experienced so much stress. I literally trembled from excitement and adrenaline for another 10 minutes, but I held the metal key in my palm. I wasn't noticed. Soon I would learn the truth about myself. I entered the archive. It was dusty in there. Apparently, Javier hadn't cleaned it all and just sat around smoking. I saw a multitude of cards with names and surnames of the children written on them. Oh, there were cards stored there from as far back as 1960. But I remembered my birth year, 2003. So now I needed a first name and last name. I knew my last name, Morris. Violetta Morris. Yes, my last name is indeed very common. But what can you do? There can't be 50 Violetta Morris in one orphanage in 1 year, right? No. So I quickly found my card. My hands were shaking. I started to open my card and saw the following. In the father field, there was a dash, and in the mother field, Morris Laura. This means I had a mother. The card also contained the information about when I was taken in. It was May 15th, 2003. That was the day I celebrated my birthday in the orphanage. But what did that information mean to me? There was only one question in my head: who is Laura Morris, and where do I look for her? Just then, I heard noise in the corridor. It was the cleaner, and she spotted me in the archive. "Violetta, is that you?" the woman exclaimed. I immediately hissed. I had a great relationship with the cleaner, Beatrice. However, she apparently didn't hear me well. She was quite old. "Violetta, what are you doing here? You're not allowed in here. Don't you know that?" "I know, Beatrice, I know. But please, don't shout. I'm leaving now." "Oh dear, why were you even here?" "Beatrice, I was looking for my parents." "And did you find them?" the woman asked, suddenly calmer. "Not really. I know my mother's initials." "And your last name is?" "Morris?" Beatrice asked, trying to remember. "Yes, that's right," I replied quietly, already sensing her response. "Oh, daughter, how unfortunate for you. There are so many people with that last name," the cleaner remarked sadly. "No, Beatrice, you're wrong. If I want to, I will find my parents. They will be with me." "Are you sure they want you?" the cleaner asked quietly. "Maybe they don't need me." A lump caught in my throat, but I continued, but I need them. Beatrice, why does everyone know who their parents are, and I don't? Why does everyone get taken into new families, but not me? Maybe God is leading me to meet my parents again. The cleaner remained silently sympathetic. I felt my cheeks burn. Child, who is your father? A dash is all that's written. Maybe he left your mom? Poor thing. That's why she gave you up. Do you really think so? I asked, though I wasn't pleased with such a fate for my mother. I don't know, maybe yes, maybe no. It usually goes that way. And I don't know anything about your relatives. You should ask the head caregiver. I went to see her. She's hiding my mother's fate from me. I heard noise in the corridor. Beatrice whispered. Oh, Violetta, you'd better get out of here. If they see you in the archive, especially with me, we'll both be in trouble. Come on, hurry up. I quickly closed the archive door. I handed the key back to Beatrice. She took it to the guard's office and told him she borrowed the key to clean the archive. This way, all questions about me were cleared up, and no one even suspected anything. I returned to my room, anxious. My roommates noticed I was acting strange and got worried. Violetta, is everything okay? Yes. I know who my mother is. We spent half the evening discussing the topic of parents. I told them how I wanted to find my relatives. The girls tried to dissuade me a bit. They could see that the news about the discovery in the archive had just elevated me to the skies. I had become too fixated on the idea of finding my mother. They were concerned that I might really go crazy thinking about it. Indeed, I still had 5 years left until I graduated from the orphanage. What could I do? No one would help me, neither the caregivers nor the director. They had given up on me. So, at best, I might be placed in a foster family until I turned 18, and only then could I start looking for my mother somehow. But the chance of being taken in was already minimal. Not many people risk taking in troubled teenagers like us. It's better to adopt an infant. You can raise them how you want, rather than taking an orphan child. That's what the caregivers told us, anyway. I don't know why they said that. They felt sorry for us that no one wanted to adopt us, older kids. In short, I began to live with the hope that after I graduated from the orphanage, I would find my mother, and maybe my father too. I cherished that dream for 5 years. And then I graduated from the orphanage when I turned 18. I was assigned an apartment. But I decided to do something a bit different. Instead of living in the apartment, I chose to move out. I wanted to study. All my friends opted for higher education, but I wasn't ready to take the plunge. I had dreamed of becoming a doctor for a long time, but I was scared to just dive into university right away. After consulting with some of the caregivers, I decided that I would first finish medical college and then apply to university if I wanted to. So I picked a college in another city. To have some money to live on, I decided to rent out the apartment assigned to me. It would be modest living, of course, but at least I wouldn't have to work. If I had to study and work at the same time, I would definitely go crazy. Over the summer, I prepared for school and moved. It felt strange to leave the place that had raised me, the city where I was born, so to speak. And anyway, I had promised the younger kids that I would come back to the orphanage, and to my friends that I would visit. And suddenly, poof, I disappeared for everyone, having gone to study in another city. Fortunately, there's the internet, so I didn't lose touch with anyone in the end. However, in the new city, my new life began, not the childish and naive one I had in the orphanage, but one filled with real adult hardships. First, I had to learn how to cook. I was now living in a dormitory. Overall, the conditions were similar to the orphanage, but here everyone seemed more responsible for themselves. I was lucky with my roommate. She turned out to be a sweetheart. She was the one who taught me how to cook. Her name was Claudia. She was often surprised while teaching me, asking how it was possible that I didn't know how to peel potatoes or cook rice. I could only shrug. We didn't need to know those things. We had a cafeteria. Of course, there was a cafeteria for students as well, but was it worth going there? I didn't have much money, just enough for groceries and transportation to college. Yes, our dormitory was 5 kilometers away from the main campus, so I couldn't afford to spend extra on myself. If I had leftover money, that was good. It was a reserve for a rainy day. Overall, the first 2 years went relatively well. I was studying well and didn't complain about the professors, unlike my classmates. By the way, they were all about 2 years younger than me. Claudia was also my classmate. She had moved from another city and enrolled too. Perhaps if it weren't for Claudia, I would have made friends with the other girls as well. She wasn't particularly unique. But we still became very close, so I didn't need anyone else in my class. I could discuss all my girl problems with Claudia. With the guys, of course, we had problems. There were very few of them. There was only one guy in our group. It was said that this was because boys usually went straight to university. However, I didn't care about that. I was old enough to get into relationships. So, I started registering on dating apps. The circus had left, but the clowns were all still there. I returned from dates laughing with Claudia, who was always ready to listen to my latest ridiculous story. The only upside was that I got to eat for free thanks to my dates, and Claudia could cook herself more food from my groceries and her own. In short, we were both benefiting. However, we increasingly noticed that the other girls, especially our classmates, were living more lavishly than us. By the time they were 20, many had moved out from their parents' homes. Yet still, one had a new lipstick, another a new handbag, and a third one even had a brand new phone. We listened to these girls bragging and bit our lips in silence with Claudia. What could we do? Since our first year, all our money had gone to groceries. Nothing had changed since then. Even when our cosmetics ran out, we didn't buy new ones. We pretended we had embraced natural beauty. But of course, it was all a facade, and we watched our classmates with envy. It felt like we were all in the same group, yet our statuses were so different. In the orphanage, it wasn't like that. Everyone was equal and shared everything. But in adult life, it was different. And one day, we were sitting in our room, drinking coffee and eating sandwiches with the cheapest cheese, I should note. Claudia was on her phone. She loved doing that. She would open some social network and eat while watching videos. I was eating and looking out the window when, out of nowhere, she turned her phone toward me, showing a young woman talking about a new restaurant in the city center, how beautiful it was, and how nice the views were. I watched it until the end and sighed silently, taking another bite of my sandwich. But Claudia wouldn't let it go easily. "Just look at them, people are living it up," she said sarcastically. "Come on, Claudia. Happiness will come to our street too. When will it be, though? Please tell me. We'll waste our youth in this soulless dormitory while others go out into the world. They're literally living it up. And we." My friend tossed the remainder of her sandwich onto the table. "We're eating who knows what. But I don't quite understand what you're suggesting. That we go to this restaurant, it finally clicked for me. Anywhere. But I really like this one. Can you imagine? We'll take so many photos there, all our classmates will be envious. It's not a handbag like the one Anna bought for herself this week. This is even more luxurious." I laughed. "Claudia, get real. Where are we supposed to get that much money? Just look." I opened the online menu for the restaurant. The prices start at €100. With that money, you could go to college for 2 months. "You always do this. It's boring being with you," my friend suddenly pouted. "It's not boring, it's rational." I laughed. Claudia didn't respond to my joke. We fell silent, and then suddenly Claudia spoke up again. "How about we get jobs? Are you crazy? You're just fearless, aren't you? We already have to do physical education makeup work." No. We won't get regular jobs, we'll find some part-time work. We'll work in our free time, earn a bit, and go to that damn restaurant. Come on, Viola, let's do it. Come on, dear." Claudia came over to me and shook my shoulders lightly. The offer was tempting, very tempting. I agreed with her. We got part-time jobs as waitresses at a local bar. We told the management right away that we would only be working for a short time, max 2 weeks. He shrugged, as if used to people not staying long. Claudia and I had everything planned out in advance, calculating how much each of us needed to earn. Half would go to clothes and other feminine things, and the other half for food. The plan was flawless until we actually started working. It turned out it was hard to earn much in the bar. Claudia and I kept hoping that patrons would be generous with tips at night. But no such luck. We misjudged the neighborhood. We only got students from our dormitory and maybe 1 or 2 others. Where were they supposed to get big tips? If they could just buy something for themselves, that would be good. But occasionally, some wealthy gentleman would wander in. I have no idea how they ended up in our place. Maybe they were all dumped by their women and were hiding from their sorrow in our dreary bar. My romanticism knows no bounds. Finally, after a month of nightly shifts, we managed to scrape together a small sum. When did we sleep? On the metro, while commuting to and from class. You do anything for the sake of appearances. My classmates started looking at us strangely. Claudia and I were always so lively during lectures, quick to respond, but for the last month, we came in like sleepy flies. We just waved our hands at them. Who cares, the bourgeois? They don't understand anything, just living off their parents. And then we got our paycheck and thought about where to spend it. We decided half for the beauty salon, which meant nails, hair, and makeup, and the other half for new clothes. It wasn't much, especially if we were going to the mall. So we had to look for clothes in thrift shops. We were lucky to find something decent, without holes or wear and tear. Although it ended up being a retro style, it looked good overall. We should be allowed into the new restaurant. As for beauty services, we didn't go to the most expensive salon in the city, but to a regular one. It was located 500 meters from the dormitory. One woman ran everything there, Clara, a plump woman who worked as a stylist, hairdresser, and manicurist all in one. And we needed to get all dolled up on the day we were going to the restaurant. Clara couldn't handle it alone, so we shared this idea with her. She scratched her head with her finger and assured us that she could indeed manage everything by herself. She would take one of us in the morning and the other in the afternoon. By evening, we would both be ready. I decided to take the risk and go in the first half of the day, so that even if the makeup on my face got messed up, it wouldn't be a big deal. I wasn't planning to take photos for social media in the restaurant. But I felt sorry for Claudia if she ended up looking bad in the pictures. Of course, we had many questions about this local beauty salon, but at least it was cheap and cheerful. We just hoped that Clara really knew her stuff. And we were incredibly lucky. The woman could indeed perform all those procedures, and she did them well. Personally, I was satisfied with the manicure I got and how she styled my hair. When Claudia saw me in my new look, she was thrilled about our luck and hurried to the salon, while I waited for her at home. She returned looking beautiful but a little sad. She wanted a hairstyle she had seen online, but it turned out differently. There wasn't enough volume in her hair. I patted my friend on the shoulder in support, and she perked up a bit. We started getting ready for the restaurant, grabbed our handbags, old, but still respectable looking, and called a taxi. An economy one, of course, but still a taxi. I had never taken one before, thinking it felt too luxurious. And indeed, the car got us there much faster than if we had taken the bus. And splitting the fare in half didn't turn out to be that much after all. Overall, I enjoyed the ride. When I'm rich one day, I'll call for a taxi every day. Finally, we arrived at the restaurant entrance. I had doubts, would they let us in or not? Despite all our efforts and Clara's work, we still looked like middle class rather than business. We didn't look like millionaires, but Claudia held her head high, straightened her back, and clicked her heels like a cat as she walked to the entrance. Inside, we were greeted by a host who immediately scanned us with his gaze. God, please let us pass the dress code. Please let us pass the dress code. I prayed silently. The host nodded approvingly and asked, "Do you have a reservation?" "Exactly. You need to book everything in advance for these places." "Ugh, us. We seem to have forgotten." "Yes, we have a reservation on the second floor under the name Claudia," my friend interrupted my thoughts. "Oh." I was starting to get scared. They led us to the right table. While we walked, I tried to discreetly take in the interior. However, it seemed that all the other guests noticed how I was staring. The atmosphere in the restaurant was dark with blue hues. Some special lamps created a pleasant blue ambience. Paintings hung on the walls, and the chandeliers looked like they were from castles, very fragile and expensive, judging by the number of crystal details. They seemed to be lit not at full strength to avoid overpowering the blue atmosphere. The floors were covered with carpets, which appeared to be red or crimson. It was hard to see in the dim light. The tables came in various shapes, from square to round. Each one had a vase with fresh flowers, and there were pristine white tablecloths everywhere. Cutlery was already set out on the tables. I didn't know how to use it at all. I hoped no rich person would pay too much attention to the fact that I held my spoon and fork incorrectly. Finally, we sat down at the table. A handsome young man was working as a waiter, and he approached us to serve. He was so charming. I could have looked at him all evening, but Claudia snapped me out of my daydream. "What are you doing? Let's figure out what we're going to order," she scolded me. I smiled sheepishly and then opened the menu, stunned. I had half my paycheck to spend, just like Claudia, but even that amount wasn't enough for a full meal. We had to order one salad, one main dish, and a drink. I didn't even have enough for dessert. Claudia did the same. We both sighed in disappointment, thinking about how easily our hard-earned money was disappearing. But there was no point in despairing now. We looked around, assessed the atmosphere, joked, and chatted about nothing, trying to act as if we belonged in high society. Just then, our dish arrived, and the most challenging and fun part began. Claudia needed to take photos for social media, making sure the angle was flattering and the lighting good, so she wouldn't look fat in any of them. Oh, I really struggled with her. I must have taken 1,000 pictures. And do you know how many she chose? 1. And she finally posted it on social media to the envy of our classmates. Immediately, likes and comments started flooding in on her phone. We concluded that our month of hard work wasn't in vain. Finally, we began our dinner. While we ate, we discussed our studies and future plans. "Oh, to be honest, I want a family," I said. "Of course. That's probably the dream of your life," Claudia replied. "By the way, how's the search for your mom going? Any progress?" "Not really. I searched for a woman with that name online. Do you know how many Laura Moras there are in our country? There are plenty in our city too. But for some reason, none of them resemble me. I should have at least some resemblance to my mom, right?" "Right, yes. It's strange. Don't lose hope, you will definitely find her." I smiled sadly. Of course, I would find her. I had promised myself. And how nice it was that Claudia was supporting me in this. We sat, chatted, and ate when suddenly we heard a thud. It startled me. I turned around and saw an elderly man had fallen from his chair to the floor. A young woman was fussing around him. "Oh my God. Samuel. Samuel," she called his name. "What's wrong with you?" "A doctor. Quick, get a doctor." The waiters quickly gathered themselves and ran to call an ambulance. Claudia and I stood up. I saw that the man seemed to have just choked. "Claudia, we need to apply the Heimlich maneuver. It will help." I called out to my friend, who seemed confused for some reason. "Huh? Yeah, let's go." I hurried to the appropriate table. Strangely, it seemed to me that the young woman didn't seem too concerned about the old man. She was just standing to the side, flailing her arms around and screaming, "Help!" But I had no time to think. I'm a medical professional. Let me through. I can help. I pushed through the crowd of rich onlookers. With the help of a man, Claudia and I lifted the old man. I positioned myself behind his back and performed several motions to get the food stuck in his throat to come out. After a minute, an olive flew out of his throat and landed on the floor. The man was heavy, and I immediately lowered him back to the floor. He struggled to catch his breath for a long time, as did I. However, Claudia was beside me, hugging me and whispering that I did a great job and handled everything well. "You're so brave, Viola." I would have just stood there, frozen. Learn from this, we still have accreditation and practice to go through in the future. If you keep freezing up like that, you'll get expelled right away, I said, half joking, half serious. Meanwhile, the man finally recovered, the onlookers returned to their places, and the waiters canceled the call for an ambulance. "Thank you, ladies, for saving me. That damn olive would have surely killed me," the old man Samuel said. "Oh, dear. Come on, the ambulance would have helped," said his girlfriend. As I gathered, she was his mistress. I didn't like her, she had too much excessive flattery about her. It seemed to me that she would even be pleased if Samuel died from that cursed olive. "No, Pedra. That's precisely not okay. I don't want to be here anymore. My mood is ruined. Oh, lovely girls. I have a proposal for you. Would you like to continue dinner with us, but at our home instead of here?" "I can't, I'm even afraid to touch the food here now. This place has bad energy, I felt it right away. No wonder it's so dark here. At my place, it's nice, we'll have real English coffee. My partner brought it to me recently as a souvenir. Let's go. I swear, don't refuse." "But we haven't finished our food." Claudia laughed. I really didn't like the idea of going to a stranger's house, even if he was a wealthy one. "Don't worry. Waiters, pack up everything for the ladies to go and bring us the bills, ours and theirs. I'll pay." Claudia and I exchanged glances. Well, why not? It was a pretty good deal. We'd save our money and get to have coffee with a wealthy old man. At least we'd see how he lived. Of course, I only agreed because he was covering the bill. And Claudia was already whispering to me that she wanted to see the wealthy people's apartments to imagine how life would be in the future. As if you haven't seen that online. I hissed at my friend. Well, it's not the same, it's not a live experience. Come on, Viola. Don't worry. Everything will be fine. What reassured me was that this young woman was coming with us. I didn't fully trust her, but with her around, the old man definitely wouldn't bother us if anything happened. You never know, the wealthy have their quirks. Samuel's personal driver took us to a small mansion. We rode in an expensive Porsche, I don't know its name, but it looked like an SUV. The interior was beautifully decorated. Claudia guessed it was probably real leather. I shrugged and tried to memorize the route we were taking, just in case we had to run away from the old man. Finally, when we entered the courtyard and the driver opened the doors for us, I looked around. Samuel's garden was beautiful. The trees were just starting to bloom. It was clear he loved cherries. In the distance, a small fountain was bubbling away. I began to examine the outside of the house. It was a beige building with beautiful, neat columns. Sometimes these columns were shaped like people, definitely from Greece. Some of them were covered in greenery. Do you like it? The old man asked me, smugly. Yes, it's an interesting architectural solution. I decided to impress him with some smart words. You haven't seen the inside yet. Come on. I think I have something to surprise you with. I took Claudia by the arm, and we headed toward the house. Inside, it was indeed more interesting than outside. Everywhere hung photographs in gilded frames. There were chairs upholstered in soft fabric, and various gold and silver figurines stood on the side tables. It felt like I had entered some Spanish house filled with antiques, not a regular home. Claudia and I were amazed. At the same time, we thought, how wonderful it would be to live like this. I didn't know what Samuel did for a living, but he definitely wasn't a nurse. I feared even head doctors didn't earn enough to furnish their homes like that. So I could only look on with envy and think that I would never have such a life unless I married an old man like him. But that wasn't in my plans for now. So I just wandered through Samuel's mansion, examining various items and trying, like in a museum, not to touch anything. In one of the guest rooms, there was a large cabinet filled with books. The shelves were ordinary, without glass doors. You could just walk up and take any volume you liked. I began to look over what books the old man had in his library. Suddenly, my gaze caught on a picture frame that stood on one of the shelves, not on a book. It showed Samuel, and next to him was a girl. Samuel looked to be about 40 at the time, maybe older, while the girl looked to be around my age. But it wasn't just age that connected me to the girl in the photo. I started to notice how much she resembled me. Surprisingly, the photograph was in color and well preserved behind the glass, so I immediately began comparing myself to the girl. We had the same hair color, light blonde, and the shape of our eyes and noses matched as well. Even the placement of the moles on our faces and shoulders looked similar. It was as if my twin, happy and carefree, was staring back at me. The only difference was that she was sitting with another man, someone I didn't know. How strange. Maybe that was why Samuel invited me over, because I reminded him so much of that girl? Who invites someone to their home as a reward for saving them? Usually, people give money, buy chocolates, but they don't lead you to their homes. Just then, Samuel found me in the room. "Ah, look at the books I have," he said. "Yes, you have an interesting library. So many different editions. And all the books are hardcover, they must be very expensive. Come on. As if I can't spend a good amount of money on quality literature." "Ah, well yes, I noticed you're wealthy." At that moment, I decided to draw his attention to the photograph. "And it seems you have a family photo here?" The old man approached me from behind and looked at the photo. I noticed his face dimmed. "Yes, that's a family photo." He probably could have told me who was in that photograph with him, but the butler, God, the old man even had a butler, called us to the table. Coffee was prepared, and it was time to try it. With a gentle motion, Samuel invited me to follow him, but I couldn't stop thinking about that cursed English tea. The only thing I wanted to know was, who was the young Samuel in the photograph? Who was smiling so happily next to him? And why did I look so much like that girl? My heart raced. I felt that all of this wasn't just coincidence. Somewhere nearby was the key to my mystery, my fate. This woman resembled me too much. It was as if she were a relative. Could it be that wealthy Samuel was my distant relative? And I was supposed to drink this coffee and leave without any answers? Not a chance. Claudia and I sat down at the table. My friend noticed that I was acting strangely. I was fidgeting and nervous. She thought it was because we were in someone else's house with some rich uncle. "Viola, calm down. What's wrong? They might think we're crazy." "Claudia, leave me alone." "That's not it. Just watch and listen carefully." I winked at her and took my cup in my hands. Samuel and his young partner sat down opposite us. Claudia silently observed me and them, waiting for some dramatic moment to unfold. "What delicious coffee," the young woman, Pedra, praised the drink. She noticed that her lover was in a strange mood after talking to me. She glared at me angrily, as if I had told him about her infidelities. "Yes, the coffee is delicious and of high quality," Samuel replied absently. He looked worn out and contemplative. "Darling, are you tired? Maybe you should go rest?" "I can sit with the ladies and see them off later," Pedro offered politely. What a snake. No way I'm leaving so easily. I thought and turned to the old man. "Samuel, it seems we didn't finish our conversation about the books. Is that girl in the photo with you your daughter?" I prompted him. I felt Pedra's gaze on me and glanced at her. She was breathing unevenly and seemed ready to tear me apart for some reason. What did I do? I thought I asked a normal question. The old man sighed heavily, and his hands trembled, just like mine. Yes, in the photograph, I'm with my daughter Laura. Laura Morris. It clicked in my head, and my eyes welled with tears, but I held back my sobs and quietly asked, "Can you tell me what happened to your daughter?" Samuel looked at me intently. He said, "Yes, of course. My daughter was a wonderful child, and even during her teenage years, everything was fine in our family. She wasn't unruly, didn't want to go against me and her mother, my late ex-wife, God rest her soul. She studied well and diligently, always coming home so happy, especially when she brought a report card with good grades. And I would buy her ice cream as a reward for her achievements. Her favorite was banana. My wife would scold me for that, saying I spoiled her and should be stricter with her. But I waved it off, thinking, why should I be harsh with my princess? I loved Laura very much. I would have carried her on my hands. It just so happened that my wife and I had no other children besides Laura. When we realized it was too late to have another child, Laura became my heir in my eyes. I invested a lot in her education. She graduated from Complutense University in Madrid. Can you imagine? She barely missed graduating with honors. She fell short in 4 subjects. But that was okay. I was still proud of my daughter. It's not about the grades, but about the knowledge. And she came back to us, so beautiful, so young, vibrant, full of life. That photo was taken during one of our family evenings. Laura, what did you do to yourself later? She started working here, didn't want to move to the capital, saying she didn't want to leave us old folks behind. Though my wife and I weren't that old. We could still work in the fields and plow them. But our daughter wouldn't hear of it. I'm not leaving. I'll stay with you, period. My wife was, of course, happy that our daughter would always be with her, but it was bitter for me to watch. The town was so small. And why should such a beautiful girl be stuck here? But I didn't argue with my daughter, even though I felt sorry for her youth. But it comforted me to think that Laura would always be nearby. She wouldn't run away or disappear. But I was wrong to think that. My daughter got a job here and met that parasite, Victor. Curse him. He worked alongside her at that job and noticed my beautiful girl, wanting her to be his girlfriend. How little did my girl need to fall in love with a guy who was courting her nicely? Of course, they started dating, and everything was fine between them. She would come home with large bouquets, candies, and chocolates. To be honest, I even started feeling a little jealous. After all, she was Daddy's girl. What was I, an old man, to do? My wife said that the guy was probably good since he gave gifts to our daughter. I shouldn't look at it all with disdain. Instead, I should support my daughter and bless her for the relationship. But I was right not to want that. My heart sensed that this Victor was a complete jerk, and I turned out to be correct. One day, our daughter came home without a gift. Well, never mind that. She looked sad, as if someone had really hurt her. So I immediately asked her what had happened. She said she had a fight with Victor. I knew it would happen sooner or later, but my wife jumped in. She said it was normal for couples to fight and that even we, Samuel and I, fought. I had to keep quiet, even though I wanted to ask my daughter for Victor's address to give him a piece of my mind. Then things seemed to get better again. They reconciled, and my daughter came home happy once more. But then I started to notice a strange pattern. She would come home either in a good mood or a bad one. I asked, "Is Victor treating you badly?" But she remained silent, only saying that everything was fine between them. Then I, being foolish, should have forbidden her from seeing him. But I fell under my wife's influence. She told me everything was fine and that it was normal, and I shrugged it off and stayed quiet, not wanting to rock the boat. Suddenly, I noticed that my daughter was wearing sweaters in warm weather. That wasn't right. It was hot. I told her, "Daughter, take off those sweaters. It's scorching outside. Wear tank tops at home." And she replied, "No, Dad. I'm fine like this." Well, I wasn't stupid. I felt it was hot myself. So I started insisting she change. But she wouldn't budge. That's when it hit me. Is this Victor hitting you? She even covered her mouth with her hand. What are you talking about, Dad? But I didn't believe her just like that. I forced her to take off that cursed sweater and, of course, saw that her arms were covered in bruises, which were so dark and terrible that I was almost at a loss for words. At first, I was saddened that my daughter had been hurt, but then I got really angry. I yelled at my Laura, telling her to dump that Victor. I said I wouldn't let her go to him ever again. And she cried, my girl, feeling sorry for that guy. She couldn't live without him, couldn't breathe, and was ready to endure everything for him. Can you imagine? I thought she had gone mad. But now I was ready to fight for my daughter. I even forbade her from leaving the house, especially not going to see some guy. And then she ran away. Just like that, one day I said goodnight to her, and the next day she was gone from her bed. She ran away, and I didn't even understand how. My wife and I hid all the keys from her. Of course, I thought my wife might have given our daughter a key. Well, just think about it. Wouldn't a mother feel sorry for letting her daughter go to that jerk? In short, despite my suspicions, I was sure of my wife. Somehow, our daughter got out of the house. Or maybe she even jumped out the window. Or perhaps that cursed Victor helped her. In any case, my wife and I didn't notice how our daughter ran away. And I didn't even know Victor's address, otherwise, I would have found that scoundrel and buried him on the spot, especially after seeing how Laura came home sad from her outings. What kind of man treats his girlfriend badly? And when he started laying hands on her, I completely stopped considering him a man. Just a lowlife. And now my Laura ran away from her parents to that lowlife. How angry I was. And at the same time, I felt frustrated. What should I do now? Where should I search for my daughter? And she didn't send any word at all. I even started asking my acquaintances if they could help find my daughter somehow. But they all told me it would be very expensive, and I was ready to pay. I wasn't sparing any money. But it was too late to start my search. I was informed about what had happened to my daughter. About a year had passed since she ran away. Turned out my daughter didn't just run away to Victor, she was pregnant with that jerk's child, and he was more than happy to take her in, helping her escape to him, and that was the end of it. Laura carried the girl to term and gave birth, but then Victor forced her to give the baby to an orphanage and threatened her, Laura, with violence. It turned out he didn't want the baby at all. I also wasn't sure if he wanted my daughter, especially after what he did to her afterward. In short, Laura's tears didn't affect that sadist. My daughter had to give up her baby to the orphanage just to keep Victor from abandoning her. Can you imagine? How could anyone love that jerk? What did he do to her? Was he enchanted or something? And she started living with Victor. Unfortunately, it didn't last long. Not even a month had passed when Victor found something to be upset about again. He beat her. He beat her so badly that my daughter died. The old man's story was interrupted. He began to cry. Both Claudia and I were crying as well. Claudia was probably crying because the story was sad, and I was crying because of the man my father turned out to be and how terribly my mother had died. However, old Samuel continued. In short, I found out about my daughter's death. Right away, I blamed Victor for it, and he didn't even try to deny it. The police came to him as soon as he reported the body to the ambulance. He had such a soulless or indifferent look, as the police described when they arrested him. They thought he might have been on something, but no, tests showed his blood was clean. He was just out of his mind. I think of him as a complete psycho. How could he beat my girl like that? I dragged him through the courts, that damned scoundrel. I got the harshest punishment for him, but he didn't care at all. That's how I saw him in court, as the police described to me. He sat there, staring blankly, with no thoughts on his face or in his head. You wouldn't even say he was a murderer, just a calm person sitting in a cage? But I knew that this bastard had been beating my girl long before and could very well have beaten her to death, no matter how horrible that sounds. When my wife learned about our daughter's death, she immediately fell ill and soon followed her into the grave. And I was left alone, without a wife or a daughter. That scoundrel took everyone from me, yet he remained alive, even though I tried to make his life miserable. But my own life, that damned life, wasn't sweet either. It's hard when you lose two women at once. I was in a depression for a long time, drinking heavily and unable to find my place. How was I supposed to live? And then one day I remembered that I actually had a granddaughter somewhere. After all, Laura had given birth to her, though she had given her to an orphanage. I had to find my granddaughter, my own blood. After all, I had nothing left but work in businesses. And you know, if you work a lot, you can go crazy and become completely disillusioned with life. Though what else could I do? I started looking for my granddaughter, but it wasn't easy. First, I searched under my daughter's surname, the surname I knew well. I looked for all the children with that last name nearby. I found several boys and one girl. I thought, maybe this is my luck. The girl was named Angela, and unfortunately, she didn't resemble my Laura even a little. But I couldn't just give up. Who knows, maybe her father's genes were strong enough. But I was disappointed by the orphanage's records. The girl was given up not by her mother, but by her alcoholic father. So there was no need for a DNA test to understand that she wasn't my granddaughter. Then I tried to look for girls with my last name and, consequently, my daughter's surname, Morris. At those words, I flinched, but the old man didn't seem to notice and continued his story. And do you know how many Morris there are in our city? 20 girls. 20 in our little town in orphanages. I started looking at each one, studied each personal file, but none of them were my granddaughter. I was so disappointed. Could it be that my daughter gave up her child under a different last name? She might have done that because she didn't want to shame my name and surname. Although there are so many Moras in the world. Of course, there are fewer wealthy Moras, and in our town, I was the only one. Maybe that's why she decided to do it that way. So I started asking the directors of the orphanages if they remembered a girl like my Laura coming to them. I went around with photographs of my daughter. Can you imagine? But everyone just shook their heads. No, we haven't seen or heard of anyone like that. I was completely disheartened. Some of the directors told me that my daughter might have left my granddaughter in another city, and apparently, that was true. I stopped my search for my granddaughter and now prayed every day, even to this day, that my granddaughter would be happy and find good parents for herself. Perhaps it was even very good that her fate turned out this way, without a crazy father and a mother who was ready to exchange her beloved child for that father. I lived in solitude for another 15 years, and then I met her. Samuel pulled Pedro closer and smiled, but his smile immediately faded when he saw me. I was crying. What's wrong with you? So that's what happened to my mom, my dad, and here's where my family is. Tears choked me. Old Samuel opened his mouth in surprise and then suddenly said, I knew it was you. I recognized you as soon as I saw you in the restaurant. I couldn't miss such a resemblance to Laura. Is that you, my granddaughter? What's your name? Violetta. Violetta? Oh, Laura named you after my favorite girl's name. Grandfather Samuel was beside himself with joy. I was crying with happiness too. We had found each other. What more could I say? A month had passed since those events. I suddenly became the wealthy heiress of my grandfather's fortune. Samuel was completely devoted to me. I moved out of the dorm immediately. I relocated to the mansion. And I took my friend Claudia with me. I thought it would be wrong to leave her in the dorm, especially since she had encouraged me to go to that expensive restaurant where I happened to meet my soulmate. Now we were going to college together. Well, how should I say it? We were driving in a private car. All our classmates envied us. Now we could buy ourselves expensive shoes and handbags almost every day. Grandpa started taking care of me like a mother would, according to his stories. I did feel sorry for my mom, of course. I often visit her grave now. As for my father, I have no intention of visiting him. He will always be a terrifying figure to me. Now I understand who was responsible for my ending up in the orphanage. When my friends from the orphanage learned about my family and its history, they were all horrified. Now they understood why the caregiver had taken so long to tell me the truth about my family. Pedra didn't stay with my grandfather for long. She immediately saw how Samuel shifted all his attention to me, and she became jealous. But Grandpa didn't want to choose between her and me. So she left him. Although I think Grandpa isn't particularly mourning over it. He and I found our family after so many years. That's much more important.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.